Hi everybody, this is Todd Brannon and I am the Accidental Excelist. In this video, this is video tutorial number 5 out of a series of tutorials on how to create a CRUD style app or tool in Microsoft Access. We're working on a customer database, and in the last video we created our first form. This will be our new customer form that will add any new customers to our database. So right here we're in design view of our form, and it's fully functional, but what we need to do is some styling, if you will. We need to do some design work. So we've got these, first of all, we've got these labels here on this side, and we've got these text boxes on this side. And so one of the things we can do is, you notice that when I click into any of these elements, that orange outline makes it active, and you notice there I kind of scooted by accident. So it makes these fields active, and that just means you can move them around. You see the 4-sided arrow show up. That means I can move that around, but they're linked. The labels are linked to the text boxes. So when I move one of these, it's going to move both of them. The way that you can move one without the other is you have to go to this little gray box in the upper left-hand corner. And if you note here, I can move this text box over, but the label doesn't move with it. So I Control Z to undo that. So if I were to take the entire box by clicking the edge where it's orange, note that the label goes with me. So one thing to keep in mind. So we've also got this header area here. What we need to do is look at our properties sheet here. And note, I'm going to scoot this over here a little bit so we can read this. So you've got all these tabs here. I'm going to stay on all, and you may or may not have this sort properties by ascending order. I'm just going to kind of leave it as it is. If I click on this upper left hand box where that little black square is, let me click out of it just a minute. Notice it's no longer selected, but when it is selected, it gives me the properties for the entire form. So the record source is the customers table, and that's very relevant. The caption is new customer. Remember, we named it new customer when we were using the form wizard, and see the name up here on our tab. And also now in the Access Objects browser here, you've got forms. So we've got, if I click this down arrow, you can see that it's showing me by object type, and it's showing all Access objects. So make sure, if you can't see your form for some reason, make sure you've selected either forms or all Access objects. In this case, I would just select all Access objects. That way you can see your tables and your forms. And we're going to create a few forms. So once we start adding to that, you'll be able to see them in this list. So this is one way to view that. And then also here, you can see the name of your form in that tab, and it's in the caption here. Now, if I click outside that, I go into the form header. Notice it shows me the form header, and these are all your different elements that you can view the properties. And we've got all of our labels, all of our text boxes selected in here, or available. I shouldn't say selected, but available. And then you've got the form. If I click back on that, notice how it selects that box, or it puts that little black box up in there. So that's another way that you can view your properties using this drop down, as well as simply clicking into an element. Like if I go here, now it's going to tell me label 22. That's by default called label 22. You can actually change that name. So let me just go ahead and do that. I'll change this to new customer. Actually, I don't have to put a space there since it's a name, so I'll stick with that kind of naming convention. New customer LBL, and then your caption is got the space in it. So it's got all the properties, and there's a ton of them. And we'll be looking at a lot of these as we work into editing and formatting our forms. Now, one thing I can do here is I can double click when that's got a double arrow and resize that box. Now I can go down here to the detail bar, and once that double-sided arrow is available appears, I'm going to left click and hold and drag this up, and then I can bring that up that way. The next little trick I want to show you is I want to select all of these text entry elements here, and that way I can format things. I don't have to do them one by one. I can go up in here to this ruler at the top, and I click into it, and notice as long as I click above those elements, it highlights them all. And so what I want to do is I want to basically, actually, let me go first. Let me back up. Let me click outside of those boxes. If I click into this kind of grid area, it unselects those. If I go to ID, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look in the property sheet. And one of the things I want to go to, I'm going to go to the format tab and I want to find the width, because I want to use this as kind of a guide. And so the width is 1 inch. I mean, that's all it is. So that's going to be pretty easy. So now if I go back up here to the ruler, select all of those, notice how, since they're all different widths, there's a blank in here for width, but I can bulk change the width by just putting a 1 in there and entering, and look what happens. So all the widths are now uniform, and I don't have to necessarily, I don't want to leave them at that, but this is just kind of a starting point. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to look at the height of this text field, and that's going to be 0.2188 inches. So I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to Control C, and then I'm going to go again and select all of them by clicking in the ruler at the top. And I want to go into the height field here, the height attribute, and then I'm going to Control V, and then I'm going to hit enter, get out of that, and notice how all those fields are now the same height, which is really the more important thing. A lot of these are going to be different widths, and that's cool, but I want them all to be the same height. The other thing that I can do is I can now click above all of these fields, and then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to, while pressing Control, I'm going to click New Customer and unselect that. And then, so what I want to do here is I'm going to find the first one on ID, where on the far right side where I've got a double arrow, and I'm going to double click, and real quick it's going to resize all those according to the length of their fields. Now everything looks a little bit off at this point. I mean, it looks better to some degree, but obviously, you know, these fields need to be wider, and all this stuff needs to be closer. But what we're actually going to do, and I'll do this in the next video, we're going to rearrange a lot of this to where our labels are above our fields, and then we're going to kind of condense everything to be in a smaller area, so it's a lot easier to use for the end user. And then I'm also going to deal with some of these labels where they need to have spaces between they're just using the database table field names, and that's okay, but I want to kind of revise those to be a little more aesthetically pleasing. So anyway, we've done a little bit of editing here. We've got a little bit more to go, and we'll finish that off in the next video. So I will see you there. Thanks everybody for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe, and be sure to check us out at theaccidentalexcellist.com.